You have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you? I'd never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you. I would like to ask you, President, who voted for you? And what mechanism? Oh, I know democracy is not popular with you lot. And what mechanism do the peoples of Europe have to remove you? Is this European democracy? Well, I sense, though, that you're competent and capable and dangerous, and I have no doubt that it's your intention to be the quiet assassin of European democracy and of the European nation states. You appear to have a loathing for the very concept of the existence of nation states. Perhaps that's because you come from Belgium, which of course is pretty much a non-country. But since you took over, we've seen Greece reduced to nothing more than a protectorate. Sir, you have no legitimacy in this job at all, and I can say with confidence that I can speak on behalf of the majority of the British people in saying we don't know you, we don't want you, and the sooner you're put out to grass, the better. Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? And the reason you're so upset, the reason you're so angry, has been perfectly clear from all the angry exchanges this morning. You, as a political project, are in denial. You're in denial that your currency is failing. You're in denial. Well, just look at the Mediterranean. We want our country back. I'll make one prediction this morning. The United Kingdom will not be the last member state to leave the European Union. If you were to decide to cut off your noses, to spite your faces, and to reject any idea of a sensible trade deal, the consequences would be far worse for you than it would be for us. Let's cut between us a sensible tariff-free deal, and thereafter recognise that the United Kingdom will be your friend, that we will trade with you, we will cooperate with you, we will be your best friends in the world. But do that, do it sensibly, and allow us to go off and pursue our global ambitions and future. Thank you. Run our own policies, have our own country, and by the way, reach out to a bigger world than Europe, because that's that is what is so exciting about Brexit.
Global Britain?
There are over 20 countries are now queuing up.
Is the first step of a global Britain to come out of the biggest market in the world? How does that make any sense?
Because we're having to pay a net £10 billion a year to be part of a market that over-regulates our industries and makes us less competitive. We're taking back control. It's great.
God, we're losing control.
Why are you so miserable? We're getting back our independence. It's great.
I am not miserable. I am genuinely worried.
We're a great country, aren't we?
And you have helped bring about an act of economic and political suicide, and that we are going to go into rapid decline.
How is it political suicide to make your own laws in your own country? Or do you loathe democracy so much?
Ding, ding, ding.
No. This point's fundamental.
Democracy.
What is wrong with running? What is wrong with running your own country?
Let me ask you this about democracy.
Should we be self-governing?
When are you people, and Johnson and Gove going to be held to account for the pack of lies you told? Are we going to stay in the customs union or not?
No.
Right. And did Boris Johnson say we would?
No.
Yes, he did. £350 million for the health service. Are we going to get it or not? Are we going to get it or not?
Shall I tell you what the biggest lie is?
£350 million. Are we going to get it or not?
You told us it was a common market, it was about trade,
1974.
and not to worry our little heads. 50 years of lies. 50 years of lies.
50 years
and we've now redressed the balance. And we're now getting our independence back, our pride back, our self-respect back. We're going to be a proper nation.
Sorry.
brilliant.
We're going to be a laughing stock.
Let's celebrate.
I know.
I'll buy you lunch.
No, I don't want
celebrate.
Lunch. I don't want lunch, because lunch to me would be a waste of time when I can spend my time trying to stop this madness.
You're not going to stop it. It's all over.
Well, I don't agree with you.
It's done.
Listen, did you give up in 1974? Has Nicola Sturgeon given up? Did Barcelona give up when they did 3 goals in 5 minutes?
Look, and what we've left is
falling
to pieces.
When people realise their jobs,
the Euro's a catastrophe. The migrant crisis is ripping it to bits.
Don't worry.
We're on a lifeboat. We've left the Titanic. We're in a lifeboat. We're in a great spot.
There's actually no doubt that there are a lot of people in this country who are slightly having the collie wobbles. They're beginning to buy in to a lot of this kind of
Nigel
stuff.
says that actually the polls show completely
the opposite. There has been a big shift here. There's been a big shift.
Nonsense. Oh my
2 reasons. One, there are people in this country who are genuine Democrats and they accept the result and say, not here, obviously, and they say get on with it. But secondly, people are realising we were told a complete pack of lies that, it would be disastrous for our economy.
And
now we're seeing
it is a disaster
that actually it's the best thing that's happened to us in a generation.
What have the CBI
and we've got the chance.
What have the Employers' Federation
and we've got the
said
chance. Well, the CBI, of course, like you, wanted to join the Euro. They were wrong then and they're wrong now.
What did the Employers'
And that is true. I remember that.
Absolutely.
I remember every leading financial
and the exchange rate mechanism
in Britain telling me
if
we don't join the Euro, it will be catastrophe. And we didn't, and it wasn't.
Go on, Susanna.
All right. I just want, for instance, on immigration.
Yeah.
Theresa May does not do on immigration what you want her to do. Won't it have failed from your point of view as well?
What I think is going to happen is this. We're triggering Article 50. It's a big moment. We're leaving. However, the terms on which we leave, whether we get the right deal on immigration...
Well, wouldn't you like to have another vote on that? I mean, obviously not you, because...
He wants another vote if we won. He wants another vote if we won.
I think what will happen is probably the next 2 or 3 general elections will be absolutely dominated by the implications of Brexit, immigration being at the top, fisheries being important. There are many things to sort out.
What about the economy?
Well,
that's quite important.
Yeah, we're going global. We've got lots to look forward to.
Global.
And we're leaving a Eurozone that is in a hell of a mess.
Ireland that's bigger than India.
Ireland sells us more than we sell them.
We must let you continue your debate.
I'm in no doubt that this withdrawal agreement is a good deal. It's a good deal because it involves large transfers of money. It's a good deal because it maintains free movement of people. It's a good deal because it keeps Britain in the customs union and stuck with the EU's rulebook. And crucially, the key point, as Mr Barnier said this morning, there is the backstop, which means, of course, the United Kingdom can be held effectively as a hostage for many years to come. It's a good deal for the European Union. For the UK, I think it's probably the worst deal in history. Mr Barnier, you say this is the only possible deal, but this deal isn't going to be accepted. So perhaps we all need to grow up and recognise that there is a strong chance now of the UK leaving on March the 29th with a WTO no deal. We need a negotiated deal to deal with sensible border issues. I wonder, Mr Barnier, are you prepared for that? Because you seem this morning to assume that the British Parliament is going to ratify this. It isn't.
Matt Dickinson has our first question, please. Matt.
Yesterday, William Hague said that voters should not make their decision in the referendum on the basis of controlling immigration. Do you agree?
William Hague made this statement yesterday. Nigel Farage, was he right?
Extraordinary, isn't it? This was the Hague who, of course, was the great Eurosceptic leader of the Conservative Party, who fought against the Euro, who railed against European integration and appears to have really rather sold out. Look, whichever way you cut this, immigration is the #1 issue in British politics. It has been for some years. The opinion polls are astonishing. 77% of the British public want cuts to the numbers coming into Britain, and over half the voters want a reduction to near zero. So people are very upset, they're very unhappy, they're seeing the impact on local schools, they're seeing the impact on GP services, they're seeing the impact on housing or the inability of young people to get on the housing ladder. So that's why it's the #1 issue. And I think that the reason in this referendum why we have to talk about this is all the while that, which is a British passport, or should be, but the first 2 words on it are European Union, that is available to 508 million people. And any of those people, if they wish, can come to this country. We have no control. The only way we get control is to vote to leave the European Union. And I think William Hague shows he's just completely lost touch with where the British public are on this issue.
Okay.
In my mind, this is the issue that will decide the referendum.
And that's why you said it didn't matter if we weren't slightly richer by leaving, as long as we cut immigration.
What I said was this. There are reports that say that we're better off with mass immigration. There are some reports that say we're slightly worse off economically with mass immigration. But to me, there's an issue called the quality of life. And I think that matters more than money. It's about thinking our kids and grandkids can have what we've had in terms of access to local healthcare, in terms of our kids getting into local primary schools, in terms of our overall quality of life. And that, David, I think, matters more than GDP rising by 1% per annum.
No doubt we'll do this. Eddie Izzard.
Well, between 2001 and 2011, EU migrants put in 20 billion into the EU economy. They put more in than they take out. I know people are concerned about immigration, but we've got to look at the facts. These facts are in front of us. I mean, Sarah Wollaston, she exited the Brexit campaign today because she said that the figures that are coming out from the Brexit side are coming out false. And she said, and she's GP, she said, like the NHS, a lot of information was stoked up about the NHS, and she said it's not true, it isn't true. So she has actually left the campaign and she's joined the Remain side. There are skeptics, Eurosceptics, that are joining the Remain side, even though they're still skeptical, because they see the economic problems of pulling out. We pull out, we are going to go into recession. Brexit is almost an anagram of recession. If you put two S's into the word Brexit, it's Brexession. They almost designed it that way.
What's that got to do with immigration, Eddie? Wasn't that the question?
Well, no, the point is immigration. If we pull out, then we become Norway. Norway still has to have the free movement of people in. So we become Norway, or are we going to become Albania? If we become Albania, the Prime Minister of Albania wants to join the EU, or we become Canada. The point is, you are from an immigrant family, and you're married to an immigrant. Why are you so against immigration when it worked for you?
Because we have to control it. We have to control it. Hang on.
You grew up. You're French Protestant from one side, you're German from the other side. Yeah. You should be the champion.
Well, I am.
The champion of people who are immigrants coming in. Look what they did. They got it to your situation.
Why do you want to stop people from the Commonwealth coming in? Because we have an open door to southern.
Why do you want to stop people coming in from countries like
because I want to have an Australian-style point system where we get the right people coming to Britain.
Well, I may be speaking from the back of the chamber today, but as I predicted last time I was here, in the European elections, the Brexit Party were very much to the front of the elections and massive winners. And I come back to a place that has been humbled and humiliated. The European Council stitch-up has rendered this place impotent until today, when you've got some real power if you choose to use it. What you've seen from Ursula von der Leyen today is an attempt for the European Union to take control of every single aspect of our lives. She wants to build a centralised, undemocratic, updated form of communism that will render nation-state parliaments, where the state controls everything, where nation-state parliaments will cease to have any relevance at all. I have to say, from our perspective, in some ways, I'm really rather pleased, because you've just made Brexit a lot more popular in the United Kingdom. Thank God we're leaving. But it is in the aspect of defence that I think people's minds should be focused. She's a fanatic for building a European army, but she's not alone. When it's completed, NATO will cease to exist or have any relevance in Europe at all. And of course, not to be left out of this, French President Emmanuel Macron, on Bastille Day last Sunday, stood at the front of an open-top car with his nascent European Defence Force behind him, looking for all the world like an updated version of Napoleon. Be in no doubt, 5 years of these people, the European Defence Union will be complete. And what is there for defence can also be used for attack. And you as a House will have no control over it. Vote against this nominee. Strike a blow for democracy. Strike a blow for your citizens. Do it today. Right, man. Puppet Papademos is in place. And as Athens caught fire on Sunday night, he rather took my breath away. He said, violence and destruction have no place in a democratic country. What democratic country? He's not even a democratically elected Prime Minister. He's been appointed by you guys. And Greece isn't run through democracy now, it's run through a troika. 3 foreign officials that fly into Athens airport and tell the Greeks what they can and can't do. The violence and destruction that you saw on Sunday is being caused directly because people are having their democratic rights taken from them. What else can they do? And I must say, if I was a Greek citizen, I would have been out there joining those protests on Sunday. I'd be out there trying to bring down this monstrosity that has been put upon those people. And in his efforts, in the puppet's efforts to get the MPs to vote for the bailout package, he warned them that if they didn't do so, there would be a dramatic decline in living standards. Well, as he looked outside the front door, has he seen the fact that 50% of the young people are unemployed already? Has he seen the fact that the economy, far from stalling, has contracted for 5 years in a row and is now accelerating on a downward death spiral, a contraction of 7% per annum? Greece is being driven into the ground, and I think, frankly, when it comes to chaos, you ain't seen nothing yet. These policies are driving Greece towards a revolution. They need to be set free. If they don't get the drachma back, you will be responsible for something truly, truly horrible. David Cameron had you worried for a bit. You thought he was even a Eurosceptic, but it's okay. You've had a quiet word with him, and the real David Cameron was back. Whatever happened to the veto? No more vetoes anymore. Indeed, Mr Cameron is now actively supporting this quite despicable pact, this plan to destroy and humiliate nation states that do not live up to a Germanic view of how economies ought to be run. Now, I must say, I thought the weekend's proposals from the German finance ministry that came out, suggesting that a European Commissioner and his staff occupy a big building in Athens and take over the running of the country, a Gauleiter, some may say, I thought it must be a joke. I thought it can't, possibly even this EU could not sink to those depths. But of course it was just a negotiating position. And what we've now got for Greece is diplomacy at gunpoint. It's the kind of strategy that Palmerston used against Athens back in the 19th century. Nobody can deny today that Greece is any more than a colony. And this is all a terrible, huge mistake. Greece is not a failing subsidiary company where head office needs to come in and take control. Greece is a nation with a soul, a nation with pride, with history. Goodness me, they invented democracy in the first place. They are suffering. They have youth unemployment of 50%, caused, Mr Van Rompuy, because they're in the euro. You are causing the misery in these countries, and you blather on about creating jobs and growth. None of this is actually going to happen. And remember, these people are being driven into humiliation and desperation, and desperate people do desperate things, and I am deeply fearful for what will happen in Greece if we continue with this mad course. And I know it's my job to congratulate you, but given that we knew this result 2.5 years ago as a result of a stitch-up, there really doesn't seem to be much point. After all, nobody in Europe would ever, modern-day Europe, would ever have a big, powerful job that was decided by a full, open process. I'm sure Mr Barroso would agree. I was musing this morning. I was thinking, what kind of President Schulz are we going to get? Are we going to get a dignified, calm, a figure that behaves like the Speaker of all great parliaments around the world, somebody who puts himself above politics and the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day arguments and is an ambassador, indeed a statesman? Or are we going to get the Martin Schulz we've got to know since 2004 as leader of the Socialist Group? You know the one I mean. Snarling, angry, unable to control his temper, intolerant of anybody with an alternative point of view, somebody who is contemptuous when in free referendums people have the temerity to vote no, somebody who is anti-British to his fingertips and doesn't like free markets. I was wondering which one would we get. Well, your opening speech has settled that question for me, and it's pretty clear. We're going to have 2.5 years of political fanaticism from the chair. And I have to say, only a third world country, only a banana republic would want to have an overtly political president of a parliament. But it's what we've got. I may represent the smallest group in this parliament, Mr. Schulz, but I can tell you that it's a group whose ideas and whose views are now being echoed by a growing number of citizens right across this continent. I'm sure you'd agree. The opinion polls show it's kind of 50-50 whether people think this EU is a good thing or a bad thing. What we represent, sir, is not anti-Europeanism. That is not what it's about. We believe in nation-state democracy. We want a Europe of trade. We want a Europe of cooperation. We want a Europe that is responsible. We don't want a Europe that seeks to be a global superpower. We don't want a Europe run by Mr Barroso and the Commission and the so-called community method. And I will do my very best to provide political opposition to your presidency over the course of the next 2.5 years, and I hope you give us a fair hearing. Thank you. Why would a successful country that's enjoyed 1,000 years of independence give up its right of self-government to the unelected non-entities that we see sitting before us this morning? And the answer that comes back from the Foreign Office and the great of the good is that we must have influence in Europe. We must have a seat at top table and we can change things. And we've done our best to prove what good Europeans we are. We go on paying you £50 million a day. We've helped the Euro bailout fund, even though we didn't join the currency, thank goodness. We've given you 80% of the fish stocks that swim in our waters. Your fleets can come and take that from us. And we've applied every directive you've given us absolutely to the letter, all of it to gain influence. In fact, Nick Clegg is so deluded he still thinks we can take the lead in Europe. When a British Prime Minister goes to a summit with a very modest proposal to protect a uniquely important British industry, a snarling President Sarkozy tells him where to go, with German approval of course, and we find ourselves without a friend in the room, some influence. Well, you've decided to head off on the Titanic towards economic and democratic disaster, and we're now in a lifeboat outside the Titanic, but we're threatened by a bow wave that is going to come and engulf us if we're not careful, and it's retribution, and we've heard the language of retribution this morning. Financial markets legislation is going to be imposed upon Britain, and we will have no influence whatsoever over any of it. Something changed though on Friday. Mr Cameron may not know it, but we are now on course. Britain is going to make the great escape. We're going to get out of this union. We'll be the first European country to get our freedom back. I suspect many others will follow. And then what we'll have is our democracy back, our liberty back, and we'll have influence in the world as you lot head for disaster. It is going to happen. Mr Barroso, you told us this morning that the European Union is an inspiration, and whilst you admitted to there being one or two little economic problems, you made it perfectly clear that jobs and growth were to follow, that everything's going well. In fact, you painted a vision that a new period of European renewal is upon us. Now, as a former communist yourself, you probably remember the old Soviet leaders getting up to give their speeches and telling everybody that there was a record harvest or that tractor production figures were terribly good. And they, of course, believed that history was on their side. In fact, President Khrushchev got up and said to the West, "We will bury you." You know, so much did he believe in his own union. Well, now, of course, we look back at that and we laugh. And I think in our tomorrows, people will look back at you and they will say, how on earth did this unelected man get all of this power? And how did Europe's political class, sitting in this room, decide that the community method should replace national democracy? I think people will look back in astonishment that we've surrendered democracy. But what you want to do is to say, right, we have a European Union, and what we're going to have to do now is have more of it. So as an architect, and you're one of the key architects of the current failure, what we're going to do, even though everything to date has been wrong, we're going to do more of the same. Now, I thought that was a definition of madness. I can't believe that is a rational response to any situation in which you find yourself. And far from it being a State of the Union, I would argue that the Union is in a state. Because just look at the confusion. We've got you as the President of the European Commission, we've got a President of the European Parliament, we've got my old friend Herman Van Rompuy, who is the permanent President of the European Council, we've got the Poles, they're now presidents temporarily of the European Council, we've got presidents all round this room, goodness me, even I'm a president. I mean, I'm not sure what the collective noun for presidents is, perhaps an incompetence, I don't know. But certainly when you take away democratic accountability, it's clear nobody really is in charge. And it's developing as a union of intolerance. Anybody that stands up here and dares to give a political view that is different to the received wisdom is written off as mad, insane, violent, fascist. We've heard it for years from these people. And the intolerance is so deep that when we get referendums in France, the Netherlands and Ireland that reject your view, you see it as a political class as a problem to be overcome. So I'm very worried about the whole root of this union. There is a new nationalism that is sweeping Europe. You want to abolish the nation states, in your case, Mr. Schulz, perhaps because you're ashamed of your past, and you now want this flag and a new anthem to replace nation states, and you don't care how you get there. If you have to crush national democracy, if you have to oppose popular referendums, you just sweep this aside and say that it's populism. Well, it's not, it's democracy. And what is sweeping Northern Europe now, starting off in April with that amazing result in the Finnish general election, is there is a new democratic revolution sweeping Northern Europe. It's not anti-European. It wants a Europe of trade. It wants a Europe of cooperation. It wants a Europe where we can do student exchanges, where we can work in each other's capital cities. It wants those things, but it does not want this European Union model. Frankly, you are all now yesterday's men.
For somebody who doesn't believe in Europe, you don't believe in the European Union, you don't believe in what's going on over there, you seem very keen to be a representative of them. It doesn't make sense, does it?
Oh, far from it. I spent 20 years trying to get rid of my job as an MEP. I thought I'd succeeded. We had a referendum. We were told the result would be implemented. And what has happened? There's been a betrayal of trust by Parliament, by our government. That vote, the can keeps getting kicked down the road. So now is the time to fight back, because for the last 3 years, the one voice that's been missing in all of this has been that of the people. Well, on May the 23rd, they're going to get the opportunity, and the Brexit Party clearly, unequivocally, believes we should leave the European Union.
And what are you going to be campaigning for exactly? What are the things, what are the issues that you're going to be discussing? What's going to get you over the line?
Democracy. Democracy should matter. I mean, goodness me, Westminster used to be known as the mother of parliaments, and here we are behaving, frankly, like a banana republic, ignoring the views of the people. So we want to bring democracy back to this country. We want to bring trust back to this country, because if trust breaks down between the governors and the governed, that can't be a healthy thing for our society. And what we're going to do is put before the British people a group of men and women, many of them who've been very successful in business, many of them who know how to do a deal, and we're going to say we need more competent people. But don't think of this as the Brexit Party just standing in the European elections. This is just the beginning of a new political movement. We want a political revolution in this country. The two-party system is broken, it doesn't work, and frankly, the House of Commons no longer represents this country. So this is the first step on a very ambitious, I'll grant you, attempt to change the country.
So this time, Nigel Farage, we're not going to hear massive anti-immigration rhetoric, anti-immigration campaigning, because you said recently the reason why you managed to be successful in the last Brexit campaign was immigration as an issue was the single most important point. So you're promising us now there won't be any of that in your campaign now, and in fact you'll be very welcome into the whole immigration debate, because as we know, we need EU nationals here and we need EU immigrants here, don't we?
No, we do not need complete open borders. We do not need to go on discriminating against people from India or Australia. We need a much fairer, better immigration system. Of course we do. But the salient point now is not immigration. It is trust and democracy. There are millions of people out there who literally feel betrayed by politicians, who've broken promise after promise. We're going to fight to re-establish that trust, because after all, that is what we're supposed to be as a country. And in the eyes of the world, we're turning into a laughingstock. We are going to try to reverse that.
Let's bring in...
the first poll is in. Farage 68, Clegg 27. That is a decisive win for the UKIP leader, and by a much bigger margin than last week. How did he do it? Firstly, let's look at how Nigel Farage has radically improved his performance. Last week, you remember, it was classic town hall Farage. He was a bit sweaty, he was quite shouty, jokey, and his arguments meandered around the place. This week, he was much calmer, he was a lot drier, and his arguments were so punchy.
Bring back democracy. It's about time we had our say. It really is. The trouble is, Nick, nobody believes you. Nobody believes you. Come and join the People's Army. Let's topple the establishment who've led us to this mess.
Nick Clegg last week, it was a bit like watching the European Trade Commissioner lecturing the LSE. It was very heavy on numbers. He was very relaxed and he was a little bit aloof and technocratic. This week, he did passion for the EU and he went after Nigel Farage time after time after time.
It's a dangerous con, because the modern world has changed. If you do what Nigel Farage recommends and you isolate Britain, a sort of Billy no mates Britain, well, it'd be worse than that. It'd be a sort of Billy no jobs Britain, a Billy no influence Britain. Nigel Farage says he basically doesn't like modern Britain. I love the diversity and the compassion and the outward-facing values of modern Britain. It's all very well for Nigel Farage to sort of pontificate from the sidelines of his taxpayer-funded job in Brussels.
The problem is, it is a fine line between passion and anger. And I think Nigel Farage got under Nick Clegg's skin tonight. I think he lost his rag. That's not such a good look when you're the Deputy Prime Minister.
They see conspiracies everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if Nigel Farage soon tells us that the moon landing was a fake, that Barack Obama isn't American, that Elvis isn't dead. You know, it is not going to happen. Stop.
Why do you deny
He claimed last week that 485 million people were going to vacate the whole of the rest of the European continent and turn up in Britain.
Nigel Farage had a great escape tonight. There was a real swing and a miss from Nick Clegg on the issue of Vladimir Putin. You'll remember earlier in the week, Nigel Farage caused controversy when he said that Vladimir Putin was the world leader that he admired the most because of the brilliant way he had played the situation in Syria. Nick Clegg smelt blood. He went after him. Just watch how the audience responds, however, to this joke.
It seems to me if I'm the leader of the party of in, Nigel Farage is the leader of Putin. And it's just extraordinary that his loathing of the European Union is so all-consuming that he is now seeking to justify and defend the actions of a man, Vladimir Putin, who, Ukraine is one thing. Look what's happening in Syria. He is the only man on the planet who, with one telephone call to President Assad, the most brutal dictator in the world, could actually help bring the participants to that awful conflict to the negotiating table. Nigel Farage's position is absolutely indefensible.
Nigel Farage, of course, insists that he is no fan of Vladimir Putin's domestic record. He is saying, the point I was making is, I don't want any more British involvement in foreign wars. And just look how this audience responded to that.
One of your own senior MEPs wanted missile strikes to be launched against Syria until, you were beaten in the House of Commons. This country, Nick, has had enough of getting involved in endless foreign wars.
Whether it's
you doing it or anybody else doing it.
Vladimir Putin was Nigel Farage's Achilles heel. Immigration is his trump card. Now, last week's debate got locked in a slightly endless argument about the numbers of people coming. Was it 400 million or 29 million? Nigel Farage's message this week was much more honed, and it's quite similar to one that government ministers make. It's about whether working class people are punished by immigration while middle class people benefit from it.
I mentioned the white working class. I could, of course, in London, have mentioned the Afro-Caribbean community, 50% of whose youngsters are currently unemployed. I can understand why big business supports you. because what you've done is given us a cheap labour economy.
Small businesses.
Now, that's been very, very good for big business, very good for rich people to take on servants, but it has not been good for the people at the bottom of society.
Nick Clegg is one of the most eloquent advocates of globalisation in British politics. He's very good on the virtues of the free movement of people. However, if you live in an area that's seen a large number of immigrants, you're perhaps alarmed that they're putting strain on schools and houses, and you're a bit puzzled that all these people who don't speak English are moving in. What does Nick Clegg have to say to you?
Let's not indulge in dangerous scaremongering. Dangerous scaremongering,
So
which simply will not come
no
about.
housing problem, no schools problem, no NHS problem, in your view?
Of course there are.
Because of immigration.
There are always problems when you have people.
Nigel Farage is a Marmite politician. You either love him or you hate him. But even if you hate him, you've got to admit tonight that he was clear, he knew his message, he knew his lines, and he hit them time after time after time. And that, for my money, is why he won.
Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
This phrase, I mean, so many leaks coming out of the cabinet. It seems utterly divided and treacherous, actually. And Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, working to frustrate Brexit. I wonder if that's something you'd agree with. Treating pro-leave ministers like pirates who've taken him prisoner. Now, firstly, who do you think's leaking this stuff? And secondly, do you think they're right?
Well, I don't think it matters who's leaking this stuff, because actually, you know...
Well, it does if they're leaking stuff that's secret in cabinet,
But it's
private.
not just on Brexit. If you think about the 1% pay cap for public workers, you've got the Chancellor saying this is our position, you've got Boris contradicting him. I can't think of a government in my lifetime who, within weeks of forming an administration, all appear to hate each other. Now, the problem with this is that how is Brussels going to take anything David Davis says today seriously? Because who knows what the government's position really is. So it is a mess.
Nigel, can I ask you? I mean, you had one vision, right, for this country to extricate us from the European Union, and it was successful. Is the Brexit deal that we're going to end up with here anywhere near what you envisaged it would be?
Well, Brexit will happen, of that I've got no doubt. You know, I mean, it would be...
Is it what you understood Brexit to be, the way things are looking?
Well, what's happened is it's been redefined, hasn't it, as hard and soft Brexit.
Right.
And hard Brexit, as the press and Tony Blair and others call it, is the Brexit we voted for. I mean, it couldn't have been clearer. We were voting to leave the European Court and voting to leave the single market. And what we're now getting is a kind of a replay of the arguments that took place in the referendum.
Although
if you want my prediction...
The government is committed to leaving the European single market and the customs union.
Yes, it is, and so is the Labour Party. I mean, you know, if you look at it, 85% of the votes in the general election were for parties that wanted to leave the single market. And yet, my suspicion, and getting back to Piers' question, I suspect that by the middle of 2019, we will see a substantial watering down of what
The one thing that seems to me that's just being sort of parked to one side is the one issue that I felt at the time was the big issue of that referendum, immigration.
Yep.
And the reason it seems to me is that when people have got into the weeds about all this, no one's really got a solution, however we Brexit, for controlling immigration, which seems to me a bit perverse, given that was why I suspect most people voted for.
And look at the arguments. Look at the arguments now about housing, primary school access, GP access, all of these problems. You know, our population is going up officially by over 500,000 people a year. Unofficially, it's probably never 750,000 every year. So yeah, we may well finish up 2 years down the road where we've left the European Union but done it in name only, and there can be a lot of very angry people.
What about the fact that, you know, we've got this crippling loss now in the numbers of European nurses who want to come to this country? How can that be good? I mean, the argument against tightening up immigration is it actually what's happening?
Staff.
You don't keep out just the bad people. You keep out a lot of very good people that we desperately need.
Well, ultimately, if we need nurses or need engineers, we will find them.
Where?
Why are we thinking just about Europe? There's a very big world out there. Although longer term, one of the worst things is why are we not training our own people? You know, with too many people going to university, leaving with £60,000 worth of debt, and not actually getting into jobs. So we've had a real lack of vocational training in Britain.
Isn't the problem with trying to get people outside of a free movement system that you have quite a complicated system where you have to identify vacancies and then people are allowed to come in but only on a visa system? Whereas the whole benefit of the free movement of people around the EU was that they would just come, it would be a frictionless movement, but coming out of the European single market means we're completely going to lose
There are 200 countries in the world so virtually everybody, where you have to get a work permit to go and work somewhere. That's how the world works. I agree with you. In theory, the free movement of workers was a wonderful idea until we let in the former communist countries, and we did, and it's an emotive word, but we literally got swamped by vast numbers of people, and our public services
who contribute to the economy, who pay
do you know
their taxes.
What? Mostly no. Mostly no.
What do you mean mostly?
Because actually, unless you're earning over £30,000 a year, you are not a net benefit to the UK economy. So you can look at immigration and say those that come in and earn good money and pay real taxes are a benefit. The rest, frankly, are not a benefit. A benefit to employers, but overall economically to the country, no.